He went back to fishing. Not for a day off, not to clear his head. Peter looked at the other disciples and said simply, "I'm going fishing." And 6 of them followed. Because when Peter moves, people follow. That has always been his gift and his curse. They fished all night. The Sea of Tiberias, black and flat in the early hours, gave them nothing. Empty nets, empty hands. The kind of silence that gives a man too much time to think. And Peter had a lot to think about. 3 weeks earlier, give or take, he had stood in the courtyard of the high priest while Jesus was being questioned inside. A servant girl had recognized him. "You were with him." And Peter said no, a second time, a third, and the rooster crowed, and Jesus turned from across the courtyard and looked straight at Peter. Luke records that look. He doesn't describe it, he doesn't need to. He just writes that it happened. And that Peter went out and wept bitterly. That was the last conversation they never had. Peter had seen the risen Jesus twice since then, both times in rooms, both times with other people present. Both times something between disbelief and awe kept everyone slightly frozen. Nobody asked the question that needed to be asked. Nobody addressed what happened in that courtyard. So Peter went back to fishing. Because when you don't know what you are anymore, you go back to what you were. And then in the gray light before sunrise, a man appeared on the shore. 100 yards out, the disciples couldn't make out who it was. He asked if they had caught anything. They said no. He told them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. The net came up so full they couldn't haul it in. John looked at Peter and said, "It is the Lord." Peter jumped in the water. What happened next? The conversation on that beach, over a charcoal fire, over bread and fish that Jesus had already prepared, contains one of the most precise and devastating moments in all of Scripture. And most people who have read it 100 times have never seen it. Because it is hidden in a single word, a word that Jesus changed on the third question. And the change tells you exactly what restoration actually looks like. To understand what is happening on that beach, you need to understand what Peter has been carrying. Galilean fishermen in the 1st century were not casual laborers. Fishing on the Sea of Tiberias was a guild industry, licensed by Herod Antipas, heavily taxed, organized around extended family networks. Peter and his brother Andrew, James and John, they were not independent workers. They were part of a structured enterprise that had been their family's livelihood for generations. When Peter walked away from his nets to follow Jesus, he didn't just change careers. He changed his entire identity, his family, his standing in Galilee, his future. That is what makes "I'm going fishing" so heavy. It is not a vacation. It is a declaration. The mission is over. I failed. I'm going back to who I was before any of this started. But here is the detail that most readers skip. John is precise about the fire. When the disciples reach the shore, Jesus already has a fire going. Bread, fish, breakfast waiting, and John uses a specific Greek word for that fire, anthrakia, a charcoal fire. It is a small word, easy to pass over, but John uses it only twice in his entire gospel. The first time is in the courtyard of the high priest, the night of the arrest, the night of the denials. John writes that the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire, anthrakia, because it was cold, and Peter was standing with them warming himself. That is where the denials happened, in the glow of a charcoal fire. Now on the beach, Jesus builds another one. This is not accidental. John is a deliberate, careful writer. He is telling you, in the architecture of the scene itself, before a single word of dialogue, that what is about to happen on this beach is a direct answer to what happened in that courtyard. The same kind of fire, the same man, a different ending. Then there is the number 153 fish. John records it precisely, which is unusual. Ancient writers did not include random numerical details. Josephus, in his account of the Sea of Galilee in the Jewish War, describes the extraordinary richness of the lake. Jerome, the 4th century scholar who produced the Latin Vulgate, would later note that Greek naturalists of the ancient world catalogued 153 distinct species of fish. Whether John intended that parallel, we cannot say with certainty. The evidence suggests he intended significance. He always does. A net that holds every kind of fish. That breaks for none of them. John notes that the net was not torn. Peter gets to shore. Jesus has already made breakfast, and the meal itself echoes something every one of them would have remembered. The 5,000 on the hillside. The loaves and fish, Jesus hosting again, Jesus serving again. And Peter, who last saw Jesus in the glow of a charcoal fire while saying, "I do not know him," Peter now eats in the glow of another charcoal fire, served by the same hands. The scene is set, every detail placed with intention. The fire, the fish, the number, the meal. And that is only the first layer. The northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee, which the Romans called the Sea of Tiberias, the name John uses throughout his Gospel, is one of the most excavated regions in the ancient Near East. At a site called Tabga, roughly 2 miles southwest of Capernaum, Byzantine pilgrims in the 4th and 5th centuries identified the location of this breakfast. They built a church over it, the Church of the Primacy of Peter. The building that stands today is a 20th century Franciscan reconstruction, completed in 1933. But beneath it, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of a 4th century Byzantine church. And beneath that, earlier walls consistent with the 1st century structure. Inside, there is a flat basalt rock that extends from beneath the altar toward the lake. The church calls it the Mensa Christi, the Table of Christ. Pilgrims have venerated it since at least the 4th century, as the place where Jesus laid out the bread and fish. Whether the identification is precise, archaeology cannot confirm, but the location fits. The shoreline at Tabga is naturally sheltered. Warm springs beneath the lake floor attract fish to this stretch of water year-round. 1st century fishing communities clustered along this coast precisely because of that. The Israel Antiquities Authority has documented extensive remains of ancient fish processing installations throughout the region. Stone basins, salt works, industrial-scale operations. Salted fish from the Sea of Galilee was an export product, shipped to Jerusalem, to Rome, across the empire. The disciples were not romantic figures standing alone with fishing lines in quiet water. They were working a large-scale commercial operation in the middle of the night, with dragnets that required multiple men to haul, in a lake they had fished their whole lives. And in 1986, during a severe drought that dropped the lake level significantly, 2 brothers from Kibbutz Ginosar, Moshe and Yuval Lufan, discovered a wooden boat preserved in the sediment near the shore. The Israel Antiquities Authority excavated it carefully. Carbon dating and pottery analysis placed its construction between 100 BC and 70 AD, 1st century, roughly 8 meters long, wide enough for a crew of several men, and a large net. It is now housed in the Yigal Allon Museum at the kibbutz, sealed in a climate-controlled chamber. You can look at it, the actual wood, waterlogged for 2,000 years and still holding its shape. That is what the boats looked like. That is where they fished from. That is the physical world where this conversation happened. Not a parable set in an imaginary landscape. A beach on a real lake. A boat archaeologists can point to. A rock that pilgrims have been touching since the 4th century. A fire built on a shore where the water is still warm from the springs beneath. Peter stepped off a boat like the one in Ginosar, walked across ground that archaeologists have dug, and stood in front of a charcoal fire next to a man who asked him a question. 3 times. And here is where it gets extraordinary. Jesus waited until breakfast was finished. No accusation, no preamble. He looked at Peter and asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" The English word love sits there, clean and singular. You read it, you move on. You've read this passage before. You know the shape of the story. Jesus asks 3 times. Peter answers 3 times. 3 affirmations undo 3 denials. Symmetry, resolution. You close the page satisfied. But the Greek text is doing something the English translation cannot hold. The word Jesus uses in that first question is agapao. Agapas me. It is the verb form of agape, the word the New Testament reserves for the highest register of love. Unconditional, not earned, not dependent on feeling, not limited by circumstance. When John writes that God so loved the world, that is agape. When Paul writes in 1 Corinthians that love suffers long, is kind, bears all things, that is agape. It is the love that does not calculate whether it is being returned. Jesus asks Peter, "Do you agapao me?" Peter answers, "Lord, you know that I philo you." Phileo, the love between friends, warm, genuine, real, but human-scaled. It carries affection, loyalty, closeness. But it does not carry the weight of agape. It is the love that says, "I am here, I choose you, you matter to me." Peter does not reach for the word Jesus used. He answers one level down. Jesus says, "Feed my lambs," and asks again. Same word, same question, same invitation, and Peter gives the same answer. "Lord, you know that I philo you. I love you the way I am capable of loving right now," which may be the most honest thing Peter ever said in his life. Jesus says, "Tend my sheep." And then, the 3rd time. And here is the moment that 2,000 years of readers have been walking past. Jesus does not ask, "Agapas me." He asks, "Phileis me."
Simon, son of John, do you love me? Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs.
He changed the word. Jesus stepped down from agapao and entered Peter's own answer. He did not hold the highest register out like a standard Peter had to reach. He came down to where Peter was standing. He took the word Peter had been using, the smaller word, the honest word, the word of friendship rather than divine love, and he made it his own question. He asked for what Peter could actually give. John writes that Peter was grieved. The Greek is elipte. He was pained, deeply troubled. Commentators across the centuries have assumed Peter was grieved because Jesus asked 3 times. And that layer is real, but it does not explain the timing. It does not explain why John places the grief specifically at the 3rd question, after the word changed. Peter understood what Jesus did. He had been quietly, honestly holding out a smaller love than what Jesus was asking for. Not out of indifference, out of honesty, out of the knowledge that the man who warms himself by a charcoal fire and says, "I do not know him," 3 times does not get to claim agape the next morning. Peter knew what he had given. He would not overclaim. And then Jesus let go of agape and asked for phileo. That is the moment Peter breaks, not because he is accused, because he is met. If you have ever known exactly how badly you failed someone, you understand this. The confrontation is hard. But the hardest moment is when the person you failed adjusts not to punish you, but to reach you. When they come down to the language of what you can actually offer and say, "This is enough, I will work with this." That is what breaks you open. This is the kind of discovery that changes how you read everything. If you want to be here every time we go this deep, every layer, every word, every detail the translation missed, subscribe right now. Hit the bell. This is what this channel exists to do. 3 questions, 3 answers, 3 times. Feed my sheep. The symmetry with the 3 denials is not incidental. It is load-bearing. John, the most literary of the Gospel writers, constructed this scene with architectural precision. A charcoal fire in both locations. 3 moments of question and answer, answering 3 moments of denial. Peter's name, not Peter, not the rock, but Simon, son of John, spoken by Jesus at the beginning of each question, as if reinstating who Peter is before asking anything of him. The conventional reading stops at the symmetry. 3 and 3. Denial and affirmation. Problem and solution. It treats the scene like an equation that balances neatly, and then it closes the book. It misses the weight of the 3rd question entirely. Because restoration in this scene does not work the way we expect it to. We expect restoration to require proof. The restored person must demonstrate they have changed. They must reach higher, perform better, display an upgraded loyalty that earns back what was lost. This is how human reconciliation tends to work. You broke something, now prove you won't break it again. Jesus does not do that. He asks once for agapao. Peter cannot give it. He asks twice. Still no. And on the 3rd time, instead of pressing harder, instead of holding the standard higher, Jesus comes down. He meets the love Peter can actually offer in that moment. Imperfect, honest, fractured. Offered by a man who knows exactly what he did. And Jesus calls it sufficient. Feed my sheep. The commission is not withheld until Peter reaches a higher register of love. The commission is given on the basis of the love Peter actually has, in the condition Peter is actually in. John Chrysostom, preaching in Antioch in the late 4th century, commented on the triple repetition of the commission, "Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep," as a deliberate restatement that the scope of Peter's mission had not been reduced by his failure. The failure did not shrink the assignment. The assignment was given to the Peter who existed on that beach, not to the Peter who might have existed if the courtyard had gone differently. There is one more layer. After the 3rd question, Jesus speaks to Peter about the future, about aging, about a day when Peter will stretch out his hands and someone else will lead him where he does not want to go. John adds an explanation. This was said to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Crucifixion. Tradition recorded by Tertullian and Origen in the early centuries of the Church holds that Peter was crucified, inverted, at his own request, because he said he was not worthy to die in the same position as Jesus. The man who said, "I do not know him," 3 times, warming his hands at a charcoal fire, will eventually say everything with his body. Arms stretched out, upside down, every word he could not say in that courtyard, spoken once and completely. Not because he performed perfect love on a beach in Galilee, because a phileo was enough, because Jesus came down to where he was, because the question was not, "Can you love me the way God loves?" but "Are you my friend? Are you here? Do you have something to give me?" And Peter said yes, 3 times. And that was the beginning. Peter went back to fishing because he didn't know what he was anymore. He found out on a beach over charcoal and bread in a question that changed its own word. Not, "Can you love me perfectly?" Not, "Can you prove you've changed?" but "Are you my friend? Is what you have, am it small, honest, broken as it is, something you'll give me?" Peter said yes, 3 times, and Jesus said, "That's enough. Go." That is not the restoration story most people have been told. The version most people know is about failure and recovery, about proving yourself worthy of a second chance, about reaching high enough to get back what you lost. But the Greek text tells a different story, a quieter one. A story about someone who adjusts not his expectations but his vocabulary, who steps down into the language of the person standing in front of him and calls what he finds there the small love, the honest love, the love that does not overclaim, sufficient. The word was phileo, the love between friends, and it was enough to build a church on. If this is the kind of discovery that changes how you see these stories, there are more. Every episode on this channel goes exactly this deep. We are not interested in the tourist version. We are interested in what was actually there, in the Greek, in the archaeology, in the details that the translation compressed into a single English word and called it done. Subscribe if you haven't yet. The bell notification means you won't miss the next one. And if you want to go even deeper, the manuscripts, the sources, early access to episodes before they go public, and the conversations that don't make it into the video, consider joining as a member. The link is right below this video. It is the best way to support this work, and the best way to make sure these discoveries keep coming. Next episode, we go inside the temple. Most people think Jesus cleared it once. The Greek texts record two separate incidents years apart, and Jesus used two completely different words to describe what he found there. The first time he called it a house of merchants. The second time he used a different word entirely, a darker one. A word that carried a specific cultural charge that every person in that courtyard would have recognized immediately. The difference between those two words is the difference between a correction and a condemnation. And the second word, the one most people have never noticed, is still there. Exactly as he said it. That is next. Don't miss it.